Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I am so grateful that you are here. So it's puzzle time here on Catalyst Energies. It is Friday, March 24th, 2023, and I thought that I would present a number of these puzzle pieces, at least in the ones that I have discovered in the course of the last few hours that I've been awake, and just some interesting things about the solar weather, the reporting of the solar weather, the astrological aspects and transits that seem to line up almost just too perfectly with the Schumann resonance and what type of data is coming off of that, and really present these threads of knowledge. And if your curiosity and will towards discovery leads you to weave these threads together into a bigger picture, so be it. I'm hoping that's what happens. It certainly is how I function in life, but of course I am a Sagittarius with a stellium in Sagittarius, so I find myself weaving threads together into big picture very, very often because understanding is something that I am motivated by quite a bit. So I have in front of us, if you are in fact looking at the screen, we have a picture of our current sun, Sol, S-O-L, and this big black space, this huge coronal hole, which is probably bigger multiple times over than our own planet. And so it is now facing us, and we got a very powerful geomagnetic storm overnight into this morning. It is being forecasted, or reported, I should say, not forecasted, although, yeah, we'll get to that. It is being reported as the strongest geomagnetic storm we've had in a number of years, about 6 years from what I'm hearing. And there's some interesting things that have aligned, as I said, in terms of the astrological transits and the data from the Schumann that is really leading me to question the official narrative around the severity of this storm, which from spaceweather.com, forecasters missed this. I'm not really sure how they did, because to me, I was fully expecting it, but that's just my interpretation. What I'm going to show you is data points that suggest that maybe it was absolutely not only forecasted, but maybe, just maybe, it was kind of nudged along a little bit, maybe more than a little bit. So I'm hoping to continue to have puzzle time with these data points so that people start to really put the pieces together for themselves about what is going on, because without this understanding, and I am 100% learning as I go, right? But that is exactly why I am putting these threads and weaving them together, because I have the curiosity, I have the will to discovery. I am motivated by true knowledge and exploration, and I want to know what's happening. And if we continue to rely on sources that say they know and just kind of take it at face value, then we really are doing ourselves, at the very least, a disservice. And more realistically, we are perpetuating our own lack of safety, basically, not understanding how the body interacts with all of these electromagnetic forces, the solar forcing from the sun and the intensity, how it impacts the magnetic field of the planet, how it impacts our own biofield and our magnetic field around our bodies, and all of the life around us. It's not just us, it's plant life, it is the animals. This is something that I think many of us are starting to discover and come to realize, that we're all impacted. But what I'm going to present here is data that will show that not only could this have been forecasted, it very likely was somehow influenced or given a nudge in some ways in order to elicit some sort of really strong effect. Now, let me explain my personal experience, because last month we had a very similar experience with solar weather, where we had a KP index that reached into the 7 range. And last month when this happened, It wasn't nearly as strong, but it was pretty close to what we just experienced, okay? And I could not get off of my couch. I was in so much physical pain. I was burning up from the inside out. The swelling, the inflammation was unbearable almost. And it took every tool in my arsenal to get myself to a place where I could move that energy through my body because it was really, really stuck. So now we had a solar storm that was even more intense than this last month with the moon in Aries. I'm going to go into that. And I was around two very high frequency people last night and a transducer or a grounder. And I'm going to explain that as well. And not even a blip as of this morning, right? I mean, there are other symptoms that are going along with my body that are also cyclical that I'm certainly feeling, but nothing like I experienced last month. And there's a reason for that. Number one, is because I was around two very high frequency people and a grounder or a transducer. So there was I don't want to call it an insulating effect, but maybe a buffer, maybe an energetic field that was way stronger than what was coming through with this geomagnetic storm that really balanced us all out and did provide a buffer. The other thing that I feel like is different is since that experience last month, I have been so vigilant about my electrochemical, bioelectrical chemical self-care. And that's something that I've gone over in detail actually in the Catalyst classroom. I'm going to show you the flyer real quick. Defense Against the Dark Arts, where we talk about the biochemistry of the body. Biochemistry. And this is what pretty much runs everything in the body, including our nervous system, which is an electrical system, right? And so if our nervous system that is pretty much running the entire show is in fact electrical and then is based on the connection of biological and chemical factors, it's important to know how all of these things work. So I go over this in great detail about pH, about minerals, about basic chemistry, about different herbs and different plants, different crystals, how to use them, how to use baking soda, how to use fasting, all of these things that are meant to give a foundation to the biochemistry of our own electrical body so that we can, at the very least, defend ourselves and eventually get to a point where we can do more than just take a defensive position, that we can step forward in more of an offensive position. And anybody that has ever played a sport or is in martial arts knows that as soon as you go on the offensive, you have to take even more of a defensive position. Those two things are intertwined with each other. And I have to tell you that when I dropped this, the day that I dropped this, I experienced a very physical attack, right? Somebody tried to run me over. And it's not really funny. At the time, it wasn't funny. But so I really put myself out and exposed myself by starting to talk about this very directly. So this is only available right now to my membership because we have been working together and we are a container energetically and have been for months. But if you're interested in that, you can click on the link below for the Catalyst Classroom and see if this is a community that you want to be part of and to be part of this energetic container that is getting stronger and is building and is taking this very seriously. Okay, now into the data. So here is the coronal hole, right? So what happens, and many of you already know this, right? This coronal hole comes and we get a stream of solar wind, and that is plasma, charged particles that come to us and they influence the magnetosphere and the ionosphere of our planet, and they bounce around and they cause all kinds of disruptions in our homeostasis geomagnetically, okay? So let's look here first. We're going to look at our friend, the Schumann Resonance. So this was yesterday into today, which is the 24th. This is just an overall view of what the Schumann was doing. So let's break this down real quick. So this is a graph of the amplification, right? This is when the wavelength of the Schumann Resonance, which is just the wave function of the electromagnetic field, this is amplification. It gets bigger, it gets louder. Now you notice it spiked up to 54 at a very specific time, which is roughly about, now this is Russia time, so 6 p.m. Russia time is 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time in the U.S. Remember this, put a pin in it, it's important with this timing, okay? And you can see the ripples that are very uniform on the 22nd, on the 23rd, and then a very large spike. And you know what this reminds me of? Have you ever turned over a lawnmower or any other combustion engine where you pull the cord once, right? You pull it again. I'm not good at sound effects. Pull it again, and it kind of turns over, and then you pull it the third time, and it finally starts up, and you get this, right? Any combustion engine does that. That's what this feels like to me. That over the last 2 days, it was this. It was like, and then it just turned on, and it came with this big spike at 54. Now, like I said, pay attention to the time. 6 p.m. Russia time, 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on the 23rd, which is Thursday, okay? March 23rd, 2023, 6 a.m. standard. There is an amplitude spike in the Schumann after 2 days of, it was still spiking and very uniform, right? And I've already talked about how I feel like this is suspicious to me. I'm like, this is too consistent to be natural, right? So, not to say that there aren't consistencies in wave functions in nature, but this seems, I've always wondered about this. I was like, this seems too perfectly lined up along all of these vectors, right? So we see this. Now, next what we're going to look at, and I want to show you too, this is the measurement of the quality or the tone. So it's pretty uniform for the most part, especially these two top lines. And then right around that same time, it gets all kerfuffled, whatever it gets disturbed. The quality and the tone starts getting all over the place. It's very interesting that that happens as it also spikes in amplitude, all right? Now, what we're going to look at next is the Planetary K Index. This is the way that geomagnetic disturbance or solar storms, our solar storms here on Earth are measured. So now this is in universal time, which right now is 4 hours ahead of Eastern Standard Time. So here's the 22nd. It's still in the green. It's elevated, but it's not storm condition. It takes a drop here on the 23rd, midnight universal time. So here on the East Coast, it's still Wednesday night. And then it starts growing and growing and growing. And so you see here that noon universal time is 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So remember what we saw in the Schumann, big spike in amplitude right at about 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is about 10 a.m., right? 10 a.m. 10 a.m. Universal Time. So between 9 and 10, there is this amplitude, and then lo and behold, by the time we get to, 3 p.m. Universal Time, which is about 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we get a big jump in the solar storm index or the Planetary K Index. And then so it goes up, and then it kind of goes down, and then it goes up again. And then we reach storm conditions almost to KP8. And so this is why they're saying it has been the strongest storm since the last 6 years. And this is 6 a.m. Universal Time. So it hit its peak about 2 a.m. East Coast time. So overnight or late last night, depending on where you are in the U.S., for instance, right? If you're on the other side of the pond, it was definitely in the morning hours when this, when it hit its peak of solar storm conditions, and now has been dropping off since then, okay? Now, again, remember this timing here. So right here, the solar storm conditions seem to be calm. They're elevated, but they're not in storm conditions. Then we have the spike in the Schumann around 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and then 3 p.m. and then 11 a.m. Eastern, we have the solar storm conditions elevate and then stay elevated and get higher throughout the rest of the day yesterday, which was Thursday, okay? Now, the other thing I want to show you is we're going to go to USGS, and I want to show you as well what was happening, because the seismic activity is absolutely electrical, and we need to pay attention to this as well. So there was an earthquake, central Turkey, look at this, 5:19 Eastern Standard Time. Isn't that right before there was this spike in the Schumann where the engine finally turned over, right? Where the wave function got really big after 2 days of basically trying to turn the engine over. So Turkey has a almost 5 magnitude, and USGS is, they're notorious for downgrading and taking things off. So we can't even take this at face value at this point, what was going on. But just to get an idea of the timing and what they've left here. So central Turkey, there's 4.9, about 5:19 Eastern Standard Time. And then Japan, and then Argentina, all through the morning. Back to Turkey, back to Indonesia. And look at this, right? So last night, 11 p.m. roughly Eastern Standard Time, Iran has a 5.6 right next to the one in Turkey that happened basically 12, 15 hours prior before the Schumann spiked. And then we have 11 p.m. where we have this earthquake in Iran that was probably very powerful, right? And when they show it in red, that means it's usually like, oh, this is a big deal, right? The shake map and everything is in the yellow. So there's actually was some damage, and there were reports of people feeling it, right? It was something that was more impactful. And then as you go through last night into this morning, you see Japan, all along, just one after another. Japan, Indonesia. And then as of this morning, Tonga, okay? So we looked at that Iran, right? This Iran 11:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if we go back to the index, right, what is that? That's roughly about 3 a.m. as we are about to reach the peak of the solar storm, right, which is the maximum speed, maximum density of the plasma particles that and taking the conditions into the most disturbed, which has impact on all kinds of electrical stuff. And since seismic activity has an electrical component based on the telluric ley lines, based on the Birkeland currents, right, in the planet itself. It's very interesting. So now what I want to show you from spaceweather.com is out of their own mouths. Oh, forecasters, let me move my camera view here. Forecasters completely missed this one. Aurora spread into the U.S. as far south as Colorado and New Mexico. Okay? How did they miss it when we had this huge coronal hole that was facing us? How did they miss it knowing that at the equinox times, the Russell-McPherson effect creates cracks in the magnetic field? How did they actually miss it? Or did they? Right? It seems to me that the Schumann resonance, I wonder how long this is going to stay up on YouTube, seems to me that the Schumann resonance spiking right before the geomagnetic unrest, like just hours before it starts to really amplify, seems to me not only was it forecastable, but I'm really wondering about what impact this amplification of the Schumann really had on the intensity of the solar storm conditions. So the show blew my socks off. These are the auroras from South Dakota, okay? South Dakota. This is substantial, all right? Now, we're not getting a ton of flaring from the sun right now, but the solar wind speed is pretty fast right now. It's getting dense, but it's not as dense as it has been. But the impact took us up to KP8, which is really, really high. Now, how many of you are getting tones like crazy right now? How many of you are having inflammation in your body? How many of you are having migraines? How many of you are agitated, irritated, having psychiatric or psychological mental health issues? And I'm not quoting that because I don't think that they're real. What I'm saying is that these all are impacted based on these conditions. And so how many people out there are having these types of experiences right now with the amplification of these solar storm conditions? And then we had the earthquakes as well. So the last thing I want to share with you on puzzle time here at Catalyst Energies is I want to show you the actual chart, because this is what kind of blew me away, right? Was the fact that 5 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, this is right before Pluto comes into Aquarius, right before it. So in fact, it actually comes into Aquarius between 8 and 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So let's go back and look at our data points, right? Just real quick, 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, the Schumann amplifies. 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, the Schumann amplifies. Then the Planetary Index, so let's see, 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time is about 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time is 9, 10, 11, noon, right? Pluto comes into Aquarius, and between noon and 3 Universal Time, or between 8 and 11 Eastern Standard Time, oh, look at that. Pluto transits into Aquarius, and the moon is conjunct the Andromeda Galaxy. And in fact, I'm going to post a picture, a screenshot of my astronomy software, and I'm going to put it on Telegram. So what I'll do is link that post in these video comment sections, so you don't have to be on Telegram to see it if you don't want to, but you can at least go to the post. You're going to see that the moon, the crescent moon, is still in the new moon phase. It's barely perceptible, is actually in parallel alignment with Venus, the moon, and the sun, and then up at the apex is the Andromeda Galaxy, and the moon is directly under it at this time. But this is exactly when the period of time between the Schumann spiking up to 54 and then the KP index shooting up to storm conditions. In between these two times, Pluto transits into the sign of Aquarius, okay? Now, and the moon is in these last degrees of Aries. And one thing that I've noticed, especially if you're an Aquarius person or a Pisces person and you have Aries as your second house, boy, when the moon moves through Aries, you feel it in your body. The inflammation in your body is part of the electrical charge going through your internal waters. And so it's already on its own not an easy transit to have the moon go through Aries, even if you are a moon and Aries person or something that, you have other transits or other soul architecture in your chart that helps balance this, right? You have a lot of Libra. There ain't no Libra right now, not until the full moon. And we have a lot of Aries right now. And so for the moon to be at this position as Pluto's coming into Aquarius, and we have the spike in the Schumann, and then we have the spike in the Schumann, Pluto comes into Aquarius with the moon in the last degrees of Aries, and then we have the KP index shoot up, and forecasters are like, I don't know. I'm just like, come on, there's something about, and who am I, right? What do I know? I'm not a geophysicist. I'm just an astrologer and a body worker and an energy worker. But I also am able to, read. And in fact, that's what my sweatshirt says. I geek reading. Like, I actually can read. I have enough scientific literacy in my academic training to know what I'm looking at. And I spent the last couple of years familiarizing myself with this data so that I don't have to rely on spaceweather.com when they say, gosh, the forecasters missed this completely. And I'm like, oh, really? That's really interesting because I'm not a professional, but I completely anticipated this exactly. And in fact, the Schumann resonance seems a little bit too suspect to me, but what do I know? Who am I? I'm just some person out here on YouTube. So, guys, that's the puzzle piece. That's puzzle time for today. So, the other thing to just bring back around, I've talked about it several times, I'm going to bring it up again. Mars comes into Cancer tomorrow, okay? So it's time to start acting on decisions of protection of home and family. The other aspect of this is that warrior class, that soldier energy, the penetration into our safe space is also going to start amplifying with Mars coming into Cancer. So over the weekend, when the moon comes into Taurus, there's going to be connection with the Mars and Saturn that is going to be really strong and very powerful. And it's going to really test us. There's going to be a testing of the will, especially when the moon comes into Cancer and meets Mars in Cancer. It's definitely going to be a testing of the wills, but also at the same time is really going to emotionally kind of bring to our awareness exactly what's important to us, what is worth protecting and being protective of, and how we need a shell around us energetically, right? Our biofield needs to be that shell in a lot of ways, and we need to work with the energies of the land that we're on, our community, in order to create that energetic buffer, because it's going to start being penetrated even more as Mars comes into Cancer. And the sign of, Cancer is the crab or the womb or the holy grail or the root system, right? This is what stabilizes us. And the plant is vulnerable, but the root system is what holds it into place and draws everything it needs into the experience, including our own personal power. And so this is going to be themes that become very relevant. And when Mars moves into Cancer, it is going to be in conjunct with Pluto in Aquarius. And it's pretty obvious now to me, and I've considered this for a long time that this was going to be the case, but now that I've seen just what happened over the last 15 hours or longer with the solar weather, with the Schumann resonance, with the solar storms, and Pluto coming into Aquarius. And Aquarius is the wave function itself. Regardless of, how you personally engage with this energy, the reality is that the power is going to be extracted from this energy and used. Pluto is a difficult planet to work with because it is powerful, it is raw, it can be obsessive, it can be compulsive. It rules Scorpio, which is where the South Node is. And so if you are still trapped or still hanging on to how things have been and you cannot eliminate this type of energy and move towards natural fulfillment, the natural energies of life and the living soil, it's very exploitive. Pluto is all about what we do with that energy and how conscious we are of the dark side of everything. And it seems to me that there was a very intentional harnessing of this energy as Pluto moved into Aquarius, and Mars in that inconjunct when it moves into Cancer is going to be like, okay, we're just going to make some serious adjustments now about our own protecting our own internal power and our own vulnerability, right? Whether that's our home physically, our communities, whether that is our own internal waters, right? The moon rules Cancer. I think that these are things that need to be considered. So I hope you found some value in Puzzle Time. I appreciate your presence and I appreciate you paying attention, and I appreciate anything that you want to share with us in the comments section. Of course, if you are interested in anything I have to offer right now, you can go to the description box and it has all the links you need to find out what is going on with me and what I have to offer. And if you really are considering the Catalyst classroom material and the Defense Against the Dark Arts, the next segment or the next session is going to all be about sound, cymatics, and the different ways that frequency works outside of us and within us in terms of those things. So if you need more information and you want to get some more information from me based, more than what's provided on Subscribestar, or social media, you can send me an email and I'm happy to interface and give you any information that you're requesting. So thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate all of you. Please take very good care of yourselves right now. We just got really shook energetically and electromagnetically, and it's not going to be the last time. So we have to really start taking this seriously. Thank you, everyone. I love you. God bless you. I'll talk to you later. Bye.